an amazing woman and friend. I could never say enough about her, so I would be here all day if I really shared everything, but I do have a short bio that I would like to introduce her. Ronda Arnold is the Chief Community Relations Officer for the Houston Airport System. Through her position, Ronda develops and implements a comprehensive approach to gain support of the airport's business strategy from business community stakeholders, educational institutions, and key stakeholders such as the Chambers of Commerce. And she did share with me that we are her favorite chamber. Community leaders and civic organizations, as well as provide executive management of the Houston Area Construction Education Collaborative, which works with the community colleges, and I know Lone Star is a great partner that she works with. Ronda is dedicated and a compassionate leader who promotes maintaining positive, collaborative relationships with the business community, emphasizing diversity and inclusion. And she will be hosting a workshop on diversity and inclusion soon. We haven't set the date yet, so be sure and watch for the date. And she also is a board member of the Greater Houston Women's Chamber, and she has globally represented us when we traveled to Aberdeen, Scotland, London, England, and Barcelona and Madrid. She's an amazing partner and really represents the city well as the chamber. She is the Southwest Regional Director of the airport's Minority Advisory Council. And she has an amazing mantra that she always wants to share with people, and she is grateful for the grace and mercy of God. I thank God every day for it. Have faith, not fear. So I think those words are even more relevant in today's world. So please help me welcome Ronda Arnold. Ronda, I think you're muted.
Oh, okay. Susan, that
Okay.
was so nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had my mantra. That is so nice.
Yes.
Oh, well, I just want to welcome everyone and thank you so much for participating with this fabulous Chamber of Commerce. We could not be who we are today without the insight and the instincts and educational genius of Susan Dyson. So thank you so much, and this wonderful team. I'm just so glad to be working with them today. They've been absolutely awesome. With that being said, I would like to introduce our wonderful panel. Today we have 4 dynamic attorneys that are going to give us a little bit of information regarding being women in law and how we can help this country and our community be better. To that, I would like to start by introducing Ms. Lee Freeman, Ms. Kyla McGee, Ms. Sue Turney, and Ms. Renee Rogers. I got that out of order, sorry. But I just wanted to say your names and thank you so much for participating today. And I'd like to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you chose your career and a little bit about your expertise and what are you planning to tell us about today. So let's start with Lee.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Rhonda, and thank you to the Chamber for having us today. I have had the privilege of attending some of your in-person events, and I think the consensus is that y'all always have awesome speakers, and so now to be one of the awesome speakers is truly a privilege and an honor, and just thank you for bringing attention to our profession and letting us share some of the ups and downs, and hopefully, you know, we can be an inspiration to some of your members and letting y'all know that attorneys are real people too. So I I mostly grew up in Denver, Colorado. I graduated from the University of Colorado at Boulder with a degree in political science, and had really thought about going to law school pretty much since I was in high school, and continued straight from undergrad to the University of Denver, where I competed in moot court and did lots of other internships and extracurricular activities that sort of guided my passion towards business law. After I graduated, I actually graduated without a job. So that was something that was scary. And I had actually been a summer associate at a big firm in downtown Denver the summer between my second and third year of law school, and had, some eye-opening experiences that led me to think that that maybe wasn't the right path for me. I had just gotten engaged to the man who is my husband now, and we sort of had difficult discussions and went through many sleepless nights about, did I want to go with the sure thing, the big salary, or did I want to hold out for something that was going to be more of a long-term solution? So I turned down that job and really sort of started from scratch in my career search. I was lucky enough to be able to be employed at a small father and son firm that I had worked for previously in my law school career, and they let me kind of have a place to land while I found the perfect position, which was a huge blessing, and I probably wouldn't have been able to turn down that big firm job if I hadn't had that opportunity. And so what I was able to find was a 10 or so attorney firm in downtown Denver, which to me was a great fit. They still had the appeal of doing big and exciting cases, but definitely had more of a family atmosphere. And that's really what I was drawn to. And started and jumped right into working in commercial litigation, which is what I ended up doing for the next pretty much 14 years of my career. I was in litigation. We moved to the Woodlands area the first time in 2009 with my husband's job in oil and gas, and I became of counsel at a local firm here in the Woodlands, continuing mostly with commercial litigation. By that time, I had a 1-year-old in tow, so my role as of counsel let me have flexibility in terms of my hours and my workload, and being able to balance some of that work-life issues. My husband traveled a lot in his job, and so again, we had that discussion of, are we going to have a full-time nanny if I'm going to look for a job, in downtown Houston, which nothing wrong with that, of course, but just for our family, the of counsel position was really ideal. So continued to work there for the next 7 years and started to transition my practice, still in business law, but more over to the transactional side of things. Anyone who has ever been through a litigation will tell you it's one of the worst things you can probably go through. Very draining emotionally, financially, and I just started to see a need and a calling really to try and help business owners avoid some of those issues that were getting them into litigation in the first place. I saw so many times where, there were some things that could have been done early on that could have saved them all that trouble. So I sort of focused my passion moving towards transactional law and more of a preventative role, and continue that in my own firm, which I started 3 years ago. A month from today, it'll be 3 years that I have been working as a sole practitioner representing small businesses in all kinds of industries, a lot of startups, and really just kind of being there as a general counsel for companies that are too small to have their own in-house counsel, but yet still have questions come up, whether it be with employees, with contracts, with real estate, commercial, leases, buying and selling their business, all those kinds of things that happen in the life cycle of the business. So here I am today, owning my own law firm, and it was definitely not something I ever set out to do, but now that I'm doing it, I'm very, very happy and very grateful to be where I am today.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. We know that can be challenging, and it's good to hear your journey. As women, sometimes we have to make the necessary adjustments to be like the Medusa. We have all different areas where we have to go until we can find our happy place. So thank you so much. with that, I'd like to hear next from Kyla. Can you tell me a little
Okay.
bit?
Good afternoon, ladies and some gentlemen that have joined us. Thank you so much for having me. I have to say, this is such an honor. I am so proud to be a female attorney, and I think there is not a better time than now to be one. It is a fun industry to work in, and I believe things are changing where it's more equal, men and women. And a little bit about me, I have my own law firm. It's Wilder McGee PC. I have 3 general practice areas that I focus on. I work in real estate, business and corporate law, and construction law. So I graduated from college from Texas A&M University. Whoop, and had a great experience there. And I wish I had an epic story as to how I fell into going to law school, but it really was I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, so I'm going to study for the LSATs. And I got into law school, and within about 4 weeks of being there, I just knew for certain that this is what I was meant to do. And my personality is I'm an empath. I'm a very caring and hands-on person. So a lot of times my clients will tell you that I'm their attorney, but I'm also their adopted family member. And I'm proud of bringing that part of my personality into my practice. So after I graduated from law school, I was able to get a job with the firm that I had clerked with for 2 years while I was in law school. And it was a personal injury firm. I give all the praise in the world to Renee for the work that she does. It's very difficult and emotional work. And I decided that it probably wasn't my ideal practice area. I grew up in the Woodlands. I attended the John Cooper School. I love this community. So I knew I wanted to be back here. I landed a sweet job with a medium-sized firm here that predominantly practiced business and corporate law. So I got a really great experience from that time. I was there about 5 years. And then I decided, well, it's, time to probably start a family. And I wasn't sure if I could achieve the kind of balance I needed to achieve at that time at the firm that I was at. And that brings me to one of my other areas that I'm passionate about, maternity leave for women. It's something that I think we don't talk about enough. And for me, when I started my business, one of the things I was most proud of is I offer my employees 3 months of paid maternity leave, because I want them to know that you can achieve the balance of having a career that makes you feel that you have that purpose, but also able to be a mother. And I started my own practice with the idea that I would just hope to find a client here and there, and it truly has grown into something much bigger than I ever expected. It's myself. I have 2 of counsel attorneys that work with me, and my legal assistant, who is, I believe, on the call, Tiffany Russell, who's my right-hand woman. And we are absolutely passionate about what we do. Like I said, the 3 areas I primarily focus in are business, corporate law. I work with small companies, large companies on an as-needed basis. Some I'm involved in a general counsel position. I do a lot of construction law, primarily new construction litigation through the Residential Construction Liability Act, which is a tricky piece of legislation that I've parceled through over the years. And my practice in the real estate industry is also thriving right now. The pandemic has not affected that industry. So I've been happy to see those clients of mine in that industry able to continue to thrive. But I now have a 2.5-year-old daughter who brings me so much joy, but also brings me to the brink of insanity at times. It's tested me in ways that I didn't think was possible, but I also didn't know I had the capacity to love something so much. So I have Stella, my 2.5-year-old, and I have an amazing husband. His name is Jacob. And then I have a dog named Frankie, who is also a very, very important member of our family. And again, I just am so honored to be here with you ladies today. And I hope that I can answer some questions for you. And again, I think Lee said it perfectly. Lawyers are people also. I think sometimes we get a bad rap, and hopefully today will change that perspective.
I think that's awesome. Thank you so much, Kyla. That's very important for us to realize that what we see that's portrayed, when you get to the real deal, it's not that at all. So next, I'd like for Renee to tell us a little bit about her.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Natalie, for asking me. I appreciate it. It is an honor, and I'm glad to meet all of y'all. I have been practicing 36 years in November. I decided in high school I wanted to be an attorney, and I went straight through, started practicing law when I was 25. I worked for insurance defense firms. I did a lot of work for the London market, Lloyd's of London. Did oil field work, went out to oil and gas rigs, defended, cases where companies were accused of tax liability problems causing oil field, blowouts, personal injuries, construction cases. I worked for a firm downtown. I'm a partner, and while I was pregnant with my first, I got board certified in civil trial law when I was 8 months pregnant. The first year I could do that. So I was very, very career driven, and actually hadn't really planned on having a family anytime soon. It just happened. And then, of course, it was amazing, the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was very hard to do that kind of work. My husband also does the same thing. So we had to have full-time live-in nannies to manage to practice law like that. And when I was pregnant with my second, I decided to step back. So I gave up the partnership. I had to give up my board certification in civil trial because I wasn't working full-time anymore. And I worked part-time in contract for 16 years, went back to work full-time when I was 49. I was able to do that because I went back to work with people I'd worked with before, my former partners. I would say that, now I would encourage, I think things are a lot better for women now. There's a lot more options, except possibly at the really big firms. I think we have more women leaving the practice at the big firms because it is hard to have any time at home when you're, practicing and working that many hours. So what I would really like for young women to know now is that there are options. I see Kyla and Lee, starting their own firms. That gives them the flexibility to be with their children more. And there's also a lot of women who are working contract for others, and women who are taking off like I did and going back. And I see there are a lot of support groups now for women who are wanting to go back to practice and how we can do that. And I'm really glad to see that, there's women lawyers are really supporting each other in all the different options that we have and making it work for us. So I guess I didn't say really what our firm does. I now practice with my husband. We've had our own firm for 7 years. We do business litigation and personal injury litigation. And Kyla is right, it is very emotionally draining at times when we're representing families of who've lost family members. That is very draining. Even the business disputes can be very personal. And so for those of you who own businesses, many of the disputes that I end up representing companies, either they're being sued or they're suing somebody, is because they didn't do the proper planning or the proper documents. And so I would encourage everybody, Lee and Kyla and Sue, I think all can help businesses get started and do the paperwork to prevent them from ever having to hire somebody like me. So.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And we have to do that work-life balance all the time. It's quite challenging, particularly in your professions. So we saved the best for last. Maybe perhaps. So Ms. Sue, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, I'm Sue Turney, and I am a business law and estate planning attorney in the Woodlands. I went to South Texas College of Law, started there when I was 32, so I went a little later. I didn't go right after undergrad, and came to work for a fabulous business development attorney who had really good business development skills and was a mentor to me my first job out of law school. And I learned the business of law. There's the practice of law, and then there's the business of law. So I learned the business of law from a really good mentor here. And while I learned the practice of law, and within about 4 years, I thought I could do this myself. So I started my own law firm about 4 years after I graduated. I worked for him for 4 years and started my own law firm. And at first I did just the business transaction law. That was what I practiced for 4 years. I had a lot of sophisticated opportunities to do mergers and acquisitions work with the firm. And so that's what my practice was when I first started. But we added estate planning.
Yeah.
I would go through with my business clients. We would get their businesses in order and work with them on their exit from the businesses, the sale of the businesses. And then the question was, do you have your own estate planning in place as well? Because that's important. And so often they wouldn't have that, and we would refer it out. So I brought in a friend from law school whose specialty was estate planning. And we've been practicing ever since. So that's where we are. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's the short and sweet of it all.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to this wonderful panel today. And since you just spoke, Sue, I'm going to ask you a question. What resource partners are critical to your firm's success, and describe how and why?
Okay, so I would say, as a business law attorney, I work day in and day out with CPAs, and so they're part of the team that we have. When you're working with your attorney, your business law attorney, you have a team of people that you should have. You should have a business law attorney, your CPA, the financial advisor, especially when you're working on the estate planning portion. So I would say probably the biggest resource partner is a CPA, because if I'm working with a firm and they have a good CPA, then I work with that CPA. If they're in need of a good CPA, I'm able to connect them with someone who I've worked with in the past, or several different folks, but who will do a good job and make sure that they're covered from that aspect. And then also financial advisors. A lot of times what you'll have as a small business owner, they are so focused on growing their business, they neglect to put money away in their 401k or other avenues. They just keep pouring it back into the business. And so I think it's important for clients to meet with a financial advisor early on, to take a look at the big picture and get set up that way. Probably the other resource partner that we work with a lot are bankers like Natalie, and because that's always a question, how are we going to finance the next acquisition, or we're going to buy a parcel of real estate. What do we need to do? So that's an important resource partner.
Okay, thank you. So now I'd like to go to Renee. What are some of the pitfalls that you've seen that business owners neglect?
Well, people try to do things themselves rather than hiring an attorney, and that can be a huge mistake. I've been involved in litigation where the corporate documents, LLC documents, are ones that somebody else did and they just crossed through. And these are sophisticated, sometimes medical professionals, and they will just cross through the names and change things up, and it's not set up properly. So when there's a dispute, the case has to be litigated. In almost all of those cases, if the proper planning had been done, the litigation could have been avoided. Litigation is a very, very expensive and time-consuming, and companies will often try to save a little bit of money on the corporate documents and end up costing themselves a lot later on. That is one huge problem I see. The other is just not having adequate insurance. I've seen people lose assets because they didn't have an umbrella policy, or they didn't have comprehensive general liability coverage. So I think every business needs to think about what kind of insurance they need to have to protect them. I call myself a worst case scenario person, which I really am. I always do think of what is the worst thing that could happen. How can we protect ourselves from that? And that is what businesses need to do. The same thing I would say with wills. People who do Zoom wills, or what is it called? The company that you go online and do wills themselves. That's a big mistake. Probate lawyers say that just creates business for them. So if people could, bring themselves to pay a little bit of money up front to get things done properly, it would save them a lot down the road.
That's great. And I know that can be challenging. A lot of them, there's a lot of commercials that will tell you to do that. But I can tell with some of the elderly people that I work with at the church, it is more important to get that done the right way. That being said, can you tell us a little bit more about what advice you would give to new business owners, Lee?
Yeah, so my advice to small business owners kind of encapsulates some of the things that Sue and Renee have already talked about, and that is get a good team in place. So like Sue was talking about, those advisors. As a small business owner, you try and do everything yourself, right? You're a startup, you're on a small budget. Maybe you haven't built up the credit or the financials where you can go get a loan yet. And so, expenses and making sure that you're keeping a tight budget is important. And so they tend to do things on their own. And I think a huge step when you're a small business owner is to recognize that you can't do everything yourself. You can't be an expert in your field and also a legal expert, a finance expert, and a taxation expert. And you need to know when to ask for help and get those people around you. The other thing that I would recommend for anybody who's considering going into business with a partner, first, ask yourself if you really need that partner. I see so many disputes over partnerships, and yes, there are great synergies that can come together with a partner, but it really is like entering into a marriage. And you are bound to that person by law unless you have an exit strategy of how to get out. So it's an uncomfortable conversation to have in the beginning of a partnership is how will this end and what will happen if we no longer want to do business with each other? But it is so key, and I see it overlooked time and time again. So those would be my two pieces of advice for people who are starting a business.
I think that's excellent. I think that's one of the things that we don't think about. Everything is about relationships. We have to maintain and build the relationships, and we also have to know sometimes how to get out of them. So this is kind of a little segue over to the next question that I have for Kyla. Kyla, as we move more toward virtual meetings, and I know your area is real estate, can you tell us, as far as it relates to the e-commerce, how has the shift towards virtual closings worked in your field? The housing market has not been affected as bad as the rest of the industries. Can you tell us how that works, the virtual closings?
Absolutely. I've been so impressed at how title companies and real estate agents have essentially been forced to pivot the way that, the norm of the real estate business. And generally speaking, it's my initial advice that I give to anybody who's considering a commercial or a residential acquisition. Hire an attorney from the beginning to review your documents and be on top of all of the documents you'll be executing at closing. That gives the buyer a peace of mind that they don't have to sit there and do document review in the middle of a closing. It's not the time to do it. It's beforehand. That's when revisions can be made. With respect to the virtual closings, what most title companies have done, since not all documents can be electronically signed, there is a requirement for a notary on some of the documents. They've come up with drive-by closings where you pull up to the title company, you let them know that you're there, they bring out the documents, you sign, and there's a notary there who will notarize the necessary documents to keep in line with the CDC precautions on social distancing. But also, I've seen a large movement into this, docu-signing, and there's a lot of programs out there now that have a level of protection of confidentiality for your documents, but also allow you to get them signed without having to be in person. Same with the Zoom meetings. Although it doesn't really have much to do with real estate, it's allowed us as a business society to be able to continue conducting business in this unprecedented time and see faces and connect with others, not in the same way as face-to-face, but it's a somewhat decent, comparable way to do it. So I think that real estate agents, title companies have done an incredible job pivoting in this particular time. And I'm very proud to know some of them. And like I said, the real estate industry, from my perspective, has been essentially unaffected by the pandemic. So it's one area of business that really has been untouched.
Okay, Sue, in relations to that, how do we maximize the value that they can receive out of your firm? Do you do something similar? Do you have any type of virtual activity? I know in real estate it has to be written. So how do you handle that in your field? And just remind us what your field is once more.
Right now, okay, so I'm business transactions. So Lee and I have overlap in the business transaction side. I spend a lot of time. Of course, I form companies and I represent companies as, over time they have business needs like master service agreements or employment contracts, whatever those might be. But one of my areas of practice that I spend a lot of time in is the mergers and acquisitions part. And that's when a business owner is getting ready or preparing to sell their business or acquire another business. As far as the CDC precautions that we've had, lawyers were an essential business. And so our office actually never closed, although nobody wanted to come in, for several weeks. Of course, we were wearing, and then when we did return, we're wearing masks and hand sanitizer and trying to do social distancing using our very large conference rooms. But there are some things that, you have to have notarized, you have to, you have to do it in person. And, and tell me and I think I got off topic. Tell me the question again.
I just wanted to know how this works in your area, what value and how does it work in what you do, going from making the importance from e-commerce. How does that relate into what you do for business transactions so we can tie it together?
So for business transactions, what you want to do when you're working with a business transaction attorney, or really any of the attorneys, it's sort of an educational process for the client. And so to be able to maximize that value for the client, you want to, when you get the documents, like when Kyla has those documents, she'll get them, she'll review them, but the client needs to be looking through and reading those as well, and noting any of their comments, and sort of treating the process as an education, an opportunity to learn more about the law and more about what the attorney is doing for you. And that will maximize the value that you get from your working with an attorney.
Okay. And Renee, now to sum this all up, we can see from each one of the attorneys represented today, Sue, Kyla, and Lee, that you have to try to develop some type of work balance. And you seem to have gotten this down because based off of the information that I received, you've been, even though I can't believe you've done anything for 36 years, you look like you're 36 years old right now. But can you tell me how you're able to incorporate motherhood or just life in general, being a human being, as well as practicing law?
Well, when my kids were young, I did work part-time. So I was there in the evenings. If I had continued to work full-time for a larger firm, I would not have been home nearly as much. And right now what I see is women finding ways to start their own firms, bring their infants to the office. Or some women have even on-site daycare or nannies in their firm for their kids and their staff's kids. I found women to be very, very supportive of other mothers and try to help them make it work. And it really is heartwarming to see women trying to help each other out that way. And the other thing I see that women are doing, that women lawyers in particular, just because I know that field, but I see women really networking together and referring business with to each other and supporting each other in all kinds of ways. And that is really important for us because we don't have that good old boy network, which was really prevalent when I first started working. It's very hard to break into business development because it was hunting, fishing, and golfing, and I didn't do any of those. And so what I did was I started working to try to get to know women insurance adjusters and develop business that way. And I think we just have to do things a little bit differently, but I think we're being successful at it. I don't think we need to do those good old boy things to be successful lawyers and be successful business owners. But I do think supporting other women, mentoring other women, young women, helping them through, it really pays off for us with business development and with our work-life balance as well.
That's awesome. And so I want to leave a little time for Q&A. So just to close this out, I'd like for each of you, if you have one thing that you would like for us to take away from a meeting with you today, let's go through those and then we can open it up for Q&A. Let's start with Lee.
So I would say my biggest takeaway in all aspects of law is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I know that sounds really trite, and we hear that over and over again when it comes to health, when it comes to eating right, exercising, all those kinds of things. But there really are some mistakes that if you make, you can't take them back. And so I would just encourage people to get legal advice early on in whatever type of situation, transaction you're doing. It really is going to be worth it in the end for you.
Thank you. Kyla?
So my major takeaways from today, and great job panelists, not only are these wonderful attorneys, I've worked with most of them, they've been mentors to me, and I'm very appreciative for their guidance. So I think, kind of piggybacking on what Renee said, we're moving into an area where you can achieve a work-life balance. It takes work, but it's possible. And reaching out to people for guidance on how to make that possible is definitely something I encourage. Something not law related, I also think that bringing fashion and fun into your business is a great way to live your life. I've been known to show up in court with a leopard print headband, and I'm proud of the new flavor that I'm adding to the fashion industry and the legal profession. And also getting an attorney, although at times on the front end seems like it's going to be so expensive, when you look at it in the case of not having an attorney and going back and retroactively fixing things, you'll end up spending 10 times more than you would have spent doing it correctly the first way. And I hope that that message is conveyed today. Thank you again for having me.
Awesome, awesome. Sue?
My comments are going to mirror what Lee and Kyla had to say. I think having a good team is important in any business, and you're only as strong as the weakest link in your team. And having an attorney on your team before you make major decisions is important. The time is now to build a relationship with a good attorney that you can reach out to, whatever your legal need is. I have a lot of folks who will call and say, I need a good family law attorney. Well, I'm their estate planning attorney. I don't do family law, but I'm happy to connect them with who they need. So I think that reaching out and having a relationship with a good attorney, having that attorney on your team is important.
Great. Renee, can you close us out? Bring us home.
All right. Well, I would just like to say, first of all, thank you very much for having us. But I would encourage everybody to reach out to, if you're a success in your business, reach out to other women, reach out to younger women or even students to try to help them, mentor them, bring them along. So I think it benefits all of us when we do that, make other people stronger. And there are people who do need our help and encouragement. And I think we need to focus on that.
Oh God, this has been so awesome. I really appreciate all of the information that you've given to us. And I'd like to open it up now to some of the team members, other members of the chamber that are on the call. I'm going to call out one person in particular, Jocelyn LeBeau, who is our compliance officer at the airport system. And I'd like for Jocelyn to say hello and tell us a little bit what you thought about this panel today. Got to unmute it. Okay.
While we're waiting on her, Rhonda, I do have a question specifically to kind of what Renee was relaying for the next generation of women that are looking at going into law. Does it matter what your undergraduate degree is in? I know I, in particular, having conversations with my granddaughter who was thinking of accounting, and now she called me last night and said that she is thinking about psychology now because one of her professors has shared with her that, she could take the honors class or something. Does it really matter, in your opinion?
It does not. My son just graduated from law school a year ago, so I have some, experience with recent law school admissions, and what matters is grades and LSAT score.
Okay.
And if you go into IP law, patent law, then you need a technical background, scientific degree. But other than that, the real main thing is to get good grades and good LSAT score.
So it wouldn't help to have your CPA degree as well as
well, it depends on what kind of law you want to go into. If you want to do, tax law, yeah, that would help.
Okay.
So yeah. I'm sorry to join you guys late. Rhonda, I heard you calling and I couldn't figure out how to unmute.
Yay.
That's okay.
I admit my flaws. I just sat there. Listen, I think it's been a fantastic forum, and I truly appreciate when we as women can get together and share our different business experiences and be able to share our different resources. And I'm really glad Rhonda invited me so I could hear and listen to you dynamic ladies out in the field and the different things that you guys are into. As another person that I work for government, but I'm always thinking about the afterlife and hearing these different talks about, what resources I would need if I'm going to be in my retirement for different businesses that I would go into. I think it's exciting. And so I really thank you guys for allowing me to participate, and thank you, Rhonda, as well, for allowing me to participate. And anything y'all need from me, please feel free to call.
She's being a little shy. Can you tell us about your legal background, Ms. LeBeau?
Oh, sure. So I first got my started with the City of Houston legal department. I worked for almost 15 years for them, and then I got hired by Continental Airlines. And I worked for them for a good solid 5 years and then went on to work for United Airlines. So since I had worked for the City of Houston before, I had an option at one point in time in 2014, 2015 to join United in Chicago. This is a very true story. I had to deliberate it because I was having a blast. I had an office in Houston and an office in Chicago. And I was having a blast at it, but I have to tell y'all, I remember jogging around Michigan Avenue, and I was thinking to Michigan Avenue in the lake, Lake Michigan, and it was kind of a brisk morning. I went, gosh, this is pretty. Maybe I can move to Chicago. Maybe I could do it. And probably about a weekend or two later, I went back home and I was jogging around Allen Parkway, and I went, oh no, this is too pretty. I'm not leaving it. So I wound up.
So just to round it off, we just want the panel and everyone to know that lawyers are people too. That's kind of the concept. And I know that if you met Jocelyn, you guys would understand how much fun we have in our compliance department. It is a hoot.
Yes. But I mean, I just couldn't leave Houston. It was too pretty and too warm. So that's why I'm here and still believe in it and think it's a fantastic and dynamic city. And working for the airport is sort of a natural, transgression from the airline to here. So, and being previous in government, it works well.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Any other
You're
questions?
And Rhonda, I see where Dana Kervin and Annette Cruz both have joined us. If y'all want to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'll say hi. I was going to ask a question too, but
Great.
what's our introduction today? I guess I'm Annette Cruz.
And your company, what's your title?
So I do employee benefits consulting. So I help companies figure out their health and welfare strategies and negotiations. And I work for USI, one of the large national brokers. And I live in the Woodlands. Well, actually now in Harper's Preserve, which is technically not the Woodlands.
Right.
I know, I grew up in the Woodlands. Anyway, so yeah, happy to be and see all your faces. This is definitely, I was on a meeting, but I wanted to jump on, and it's really good to see y'all. I'm glad more people need to get on video.
What is your question?
Oh yeah, my question was actually what kind of innovations, a lot of businesses are changing right now. And with the challenge of legal Zoom or whatever those online ones are, I'm wondering what kind of innovations and future of lawyering you may see or be trying to explore.
Anyone want to take that? Sue, Kyla, Leah, Renee?
I'll jump in. When I hear legal Zoom, I get kind of this eerie feeling inside. So I've had some bad experiences with some documents that they've prepared for my clients. But I think the pandemic has forced us to become more reliant on technology. And in a way, it's very welcome for our industry. I think the productivity, at least at my office, has been just as good, if not better, remotely. And that's something that business owners are starting to consider now that they maybe didn't consider in the past. That, think about the overhead that you spend on office space, and you may not need that as much as you thought that you did. So from my perspective, although I'm not tech savvy, I am embracing it as being a new part of our practice.
Awesome. Did that answer your question, Annette?
Sure. I mean,
anybody else have anything you want to?
Pricing, people are doing different kinds of contracts and all sorts of businesses because of this kind of scenario. I was just curious if any of y'all were, dreaming about different ways as opposed to the way the good old boys, so to speak, created it in the past. No offense to any guys here, we're glad you're here. But, some of the traditional ways weren't really based on merit. So I'm just curious about that. I'll let y'all percolate that. You can talk about it next time.
Anybody else on the panel want to join in? Anybody else have a comment?
I was just going to say that I think technology has allowed the practice of law to move forward in ways that I never thought possible. When I started 17 years ago, it just wouldn't have been possible for us to do anything but work in the office all day, every day. And so it gives us that flexibility, which is great. But at the same time, I still see the need for having a personal relationship with a lawyer that you can trust. And, I think that, like I said, we've moved forward in technology, and that is helped and that is welcome. But at the same time, I don't see places like LegalZoom or that kind of model taking over. I think people still want to have a personal relationship with their lawyer. And so I think that the two can still work together really well.
That's great. Miss Dana, thank you guys for that response. Was that helpful, Annette? Great, cool. Miss Dana, can you tell us who you are? Because we can't live without you. You're muted. Unmute yourself. It's at the top. It'll say unmute if you put it over at the top, your cursor.
There you go.
There you are.
Okay, well, excuse the way I'm dressed. I have a project that I'm working on today, and I'm working with my daughter. And anyway, this was really helpful to me, just listening in on the conversations, because one of the panelists talked about umbrella insurance. And I remember my financial advisor talking with me about that. I need to do that as well. So how does one go about getting umbrella insurance?
Ladies, somebody mentioned that. I heard it.
I mentioned it. Basically, you just need to talk with your insurance agent. You'll have to have enough coverage on the primary layer to be able to qualify for umbrella insurance. But umbrella insurance is actually typically very cheap. It's just a couple $100s a year. Of course, you have to pay more for the underlying insurance because you have higher limits. But I've actually seen cases where people have lost rental homes and that sort of thing because they did not have umbrella insurance. And it's a shame because it's very cheap. And that is, for personally, you can also get a lot of different coverages for your business. But I think it's good to sit down with your insurance agent and go over what exposures you have. Do you have rental properties? Or does your business have workers' comp? Whatever you need to get a really good agent and sit down and go over all the possible risk and spend that money for insurance, because you will be glad you did if something does happen.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, if there are any more questions, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I have truly enjoyed this panel today. Thank you so much. We need to do more of these. It's something that we can take and use in our lives that will help us be better stewards as we move forward as women and as mothers and as leaders in the city and actually for the whole human race. So with that, if there are no more questions, we want to thank you for participating today, and we look forward to having another event. Thank you so much. Y'all have a nice evening.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Good to see y'all.
Thank you all.